There's DNA, witness statements. There's certain, like I said, stuff that we have now that we didn't have back then that assisted us in being able to look at this case a little differently.
Can you elaborate again what you have now that you did not have?
I can't elaborate on that. Unfortunately, this case was brought together by a grand jury, and that information is confidential, so I cannot go into the details that was brought forward in that grand jury.
Can you talk about the DNA though? How did the DNA play a role in it?
I can't talk about that either. That was another thing that was discussed in the grand jury.
What about the suspect? How old was she? How was she when she was approached by officers? Talk a little bit about her and the person she shot, allegedly shot.
The investigation in this, we do believe that this was domestic in nature. At the time of arrest, she was 66 years old. When the offense happened, she was 32. She was on the scene. She was interviewed at the time of the offense. However, charges were not brought forward. It was later on, it was yesterday that charges were actually charged and filed.
Were they husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend? How did she?
I can't go into the nature of their relationship, but I can tell you it was domestic in nature.
Has she said whether or not she was abused at the time?
I can't go into that. That would be something that was learned in debrief or talked about in a grand jury. And like I said before, that's confidential.
In your opening statement, you said that the victim was found with a gunshot wound.
Mm-hmm.
But I recall previous story said multiple gunshots. It was only one gunshot wound?
So at the time when we arrived, it only appeared to be one gunshot wound. When we go into the autopsy, we can discover certain additional information, but we talk about what's happened when we arrived on the scene.
So did that with one gunshot wound or
I can't go into the details of that. You know that.
But as far as the back on the DNA, as far as like cigarette butt, hair follicle, usually those things are shared. I mean, is there a reason you can't?
So usually those things are shared because when we make arrests, they're arrest warrant cases or cases that are probable cause that will be released once that person goes through C-10 or any type of court proceedings the next day. In a grand jury process, only thing that is going to be released by the court is the actual charging document. Now, no details of what was actually released in the grand jury. That's the difference between this case and the previous cases that we come and talk about.
So let's follow up on that. Why is this a grand jury case and not a traditional case?
Because of how long it took. When we have these older cases, usually with witnesses and certain evidence that are 30 plus years old, we like to present everything to the grand jury because it's not something that is fresh, that most of the time the detective was around. The detective is most likely swearing and testifying to evidence that was obtained prior to his involvement in the case.
Question, and I'm sure you covered this, but my mistake for being late. What are you charging her with? You just said it was domestic in nature.
So we are charging her with second-degree murder and obstruction of justice. That's what she was indicted on.
And can you talk about the obstruction? What was the obstruction?
You know, I can't go into that. That was in grand jury.
All right, any other questions, sir?
You mentioned that detectives spoke to her at the scene of the crime.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any other conversation with her over the past 30 years?
Yes, there were multiple conversations with her over the past 30 years.
Can you spell her name?
Her name is going to be, first name is Sheila, S-H-E-I-L-A, last name Brown, B-R-O-W-N, of Annapolis, Maryland.
And she's where now?
She is currently going to go through the court proceedings this morning in reference to being charged.
In what courthouse?
I'm not sure about that. I can't tell you that right now. Just because I don't know. It's different.
All right, thank you all for coming. We appreciate it, guys.
Can I just ask about the summary what we missed, all right?
What'd you say?
Can we just ask about the summary what this weekend?
Yeah, sure.
Give just like a minute. I don't want to
Okay.
waste your time. But can you just? Yeah,
Actually,
you're
I'm gonna mic them down if you're gonna ask me.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That was just a dry rehearsal.
I know.
I tried, though. I give you credit.
That was for real.
If you just stand here so we get different back, then we're going to hire one.
Okay, wait,
We'll wait for him too, yeah.
He's in the meetings outside. All right.
Appreciate you taking
No
the time.
problem.
Sorry. That way? All right. Oh, he's a bear.
That's all good.
All right, get it? Yeah, wait for him.
Am I in your way?
No, you're good. It's just the same stuff. I just want to make sure I heard it right. Does that work well? I always wonder
Usually
about this.
does, except for like right now. 1, 2. 1, 2. A little bit more. Just 22. All right. All right. Sorry, can you get your name and title?
My name is Inspector Kevin Kentish, Kevin. Last name is Kentish, Kentish.
All right. Can you walk us through, what you're revealing today about this cold case that's been solved?
When the crime happened.
Okay, so this arrest and a reference to a 1990 homicide. So this happened on March 28th of 1990 when MPD units responded to the 500 block of M Street Northeast in reference to a shooting. When they arrived on the scene, they located a adult male victim suffering from gunshot wound. He was subsequently pronounced on the scene, and the decedent in that case was identified as 34-year-old Norman Rich of Northeast DC. Detectives were persistent, looked back at the evidence, and we were able to get a grand jury indictment working with the United States Attorney's Office in reference to a second-degree murder and obstruction of justice charge on 66-year-old Sheila Brown of Annapolis, Maryland. Yesterday, working with the Annapolis Police Department as well as the United States Marshal Service, we were able to place Sheila Brown under arrest for the bench warrant, and she was subsequently charged in D.C. For second-degree murder and obstruction of justice.
Can you talk a bit about what her relation is? What's the connection between the two?
Only thing I at liberty to talk about right now is that it is domestic in nature. This case was brought forward by a grand jury indictment, and as everybody knows, the grand jury is confidential, so it's nothing I can speak about at this moment.
So you can't talk to what actually tipped you off to that her involvement here, or has she been a suspect throughout?
Only thing I can say that put this over the line was that it was great detective work. It wasn't so much as a new evidence coming out that just blew this out the water, but it was more so of our detectives reevaluating the case, looking at the evidence, and just doing great detective work.
How do cold cases work? I mean, they're sitting there, you got evidence that's been there for years. Like, when are people assess them on a weekly basis, or just when something pops?
No, so what we have detectives assigned to our cold case unit, major case unit. They're constantly going over, looking at these cases. As you know, DNA 30 years ago and DNA now is completely different. So we are constantly testing old DNA with the new techniques and going through cases, reevaluating them. So it's a process that they have worked on and they have been pretty proficient at. So that's kind of.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
All right, very good.
So for the people that might have came in later, I gave this to some of the people that were here earlier. This is just a printout of the release that's going out today. And the older piece of paper there is a release that we put out in October 2020. I don't know where my other ones are at. Here's the release. But there's a release and a video on our website from October 2020 when we put out a whole pre-produced